folks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Sweet Nothings podcast. If you're new here, or if it's been a little while, this is your home of funny, relaxed, and informative chats all about the love of eating. We'll talk about the latest food trends, controversial opinions, and all things edible. And I'm glad to say we're actually relatively punctual with this month's episode, considering how the rest of the year has gone. So if you are a long-time listener, thank you very much for sticking around. And if you're new, you're lucky you've joined at a time where the schedule allows for episodes to actually be published. Today, folks, we are getting into traditional or old-fashioned foods that are to us glorious, lovely, comforting, nostalgic, and to others are disturbing, terrifying, and or downright disgusting. And I have very much enjoyed speaking to people in real life or getting some comments from you guys on YouTube and on Instagram about some stunning examples of this. And I can't wait to get our teeth stuck into it today, because truly it seems like every single place, culture, religion, everyone in the world has a good example of this, and it's been very fun getting into that. So let's do it. But first, I feel I would be remiss not to discuss the most chaotic, if you can even call this a food trend, the most chaotic consumerism-driven nightmare we've been subjected to this month. We are talking about the Starbucks Bear Cup, folks. If you've been blessed enough to have not had this pop up on any of your social media feeds, be glad. You're probably a more interesting person than I am. The Starbucks Bear Cup is marketing genius, as Starbucks have been so good at doing for many, many years now. Instead of just releasing the kind of red cups, as they're colloquially known, or they're kind of annually special kind of Christmas and festive cup designs. Traditionally, they're always just red, and then they started having designs on them, and then they released limited edition ones. People go nuts for them. And of course, in the good old US of A, they released these glasses, so like a glass jar, almost like the kind of drinking jar you would find in TK Maxx, you know, the kind of thing we were all obsessed with 10 years ago because it looked good on Pinterest. That in the shape of a teddy bear with a kind of unscrewable lid cap thing that has a hole for a straw. That's it, folks. Kind of thing you can find on Temu for a price that I don't even want to think about. But they were selling these for like $30 in the US, and people have been genuinely physically fighting over this thing. It's like the Stanley Cup thing all over again, except just a few years, into the future. It's terrifying. It's terrifying not only because of the reality of the situation, but because of really what it represents in this whole, not just in the world of social media, but also, what is wrong with us? Why do products have us in such a chokehold? Especially these kind of limited edition food and beverage related things just seem to get, probably because it's still an accessible price. We're not talking about the release of a new Louis Vuitton handbag, or even something slightly more accessible, such as the Skims underwear releases that they do. We're talking about a cup, and it's so accessible, meaning that people are so obsessed with the idea of being seen to be lucky or fortunate or important enough to have one, and to be physically beefing with people and Starbucks employees over this. I have no idea. It's not even particularly festive. A teddy bear is not even the first thing that pops to mind when you think of Christmas. I don't know, folks. It's all been a little bit insane, but also not surprising at the same time. Other than that, we continue to see not much in the way of food trends in any which way this year, if it's not Dubai chocolate related, and I'm really, really done with talking about it. So let's instead focus, considering that it is halfway through November as I bring this to you, more than halfway through November by the time you're probably listening to this. It's Christmas time. whether you want to negate it or not, it's been Christmas time since midnight on the 1st of November, and companies are letting us know about it, as always. So in food news this month, we have a couple of things that sound appealing and one that's just downright disturbing, and we're all in the kind of realm of gingerbread and spices. The first and most interesting as a Scot has to be the Iron Brew Winter Brew. I'll put it out there as a very unpatriotic disclaimer that I'm not actually a fan of Iron Brew. If you're listening to this outside of the UK, or even outside of Scotland perhaps, Iron Brew is, I believe, one of our best-selling beverages. There was some kind of statistic, I don't know if it's still the same, but there was some kind of statistic not too long ago that there's only like 3 countries in the world where Coca-Cola is not the most sold beverage. And it's like Peru because they have Inca Cola. I think one of the countries in the Middle East because they literally don't sell it. And Scotland because we have Iron Brew. And I never really know how to describe the flavour of Iron Brew to the uninitiated, to those out with Scotland. To me, it tastes like bubblegum. It's got that kind of like hyper sweet flavour that you just can't really put your finger on. It's bright orange, so I think lots of people think it's going to be orange flavoured. Orange isn't even in the conversation. I have no idea what it tastes like. It just tastes sweet to me, and I've never loved it. But they've released this spiced ginger and cinnamon version of Iron Brew, which intrigues me. It looks really cute. It's got this little kind of maroon can, which I can imagine has caused some issues with certain football team fans in Scotland, but don't think that was probably entirely out of their marketing scheme. But it's an interesting one. I'm not in Scotland in a moment. I will be back for a very fleeting visit over the winter, so I'm hoping that I can try it while I'm there. It's not the only beverage getting festive though. There's also going to be released in the UK a gingerbread flavoured Pepsi. Also very interesting. Don't know if it's something we've ever seen before. You have your Pepsi Lemon, your Pepsi Lime, and all of the millions of kind of vanilla Coke variants, cherry Coke, things like that. So gingerbread feels like an interesting one. It's probably just their desperate attempt to move any kind of attention away from Coca-Cola at the time of year when Coca-Cola is most advertised, but also not very much thought of as an actual product to consume. But I digress. We then have another very interesting offering from the folks at Mr. Kipling, who usually make the little kind of individual cakes, tarts, pies, etc. They have released an ice cream, which I think they already have a couple of different flavours of, though I've still yet to try it. And they've released a Mr. Kipling mince pie ice cream. I believe the ice cream itself is probably just either like milk flavoured or vanilla flavoured with wee chunks of mince meat and pastry through it. To me, that sounds like an absolute banger, so I hope it's actually pretty good. But I would truly be a failure to you all if I didn't bring to you the most shocking, disturbing, and yet also intriguing festive food news that's arrived on my desk this November, and that is the gingerbread Doritos. I don't even know where to begin. Doritos are iconic, great texture, great taste. Their employment of MSG is truly inspiring. But gingerbread? I don't know. I feel like in the UK we haven't had too many novelty Doritos flavors. We tend to have like 3 that really stick around, being the kind of what's it called? The cool original or something like that. The blue bag. There's the cheesy one which I can't stand, and there's the chili heat wave, which is fantastic. And there's a couple of others you'll see sometimes, but we don't have anywhere near the selection that you can find in the US or probably also in Canada. So to see what I'm hoping is a sweet variant, also with spices on it, is just crazy talk. But it also doesn't turn me off too much, I have to say. It's something that if you put a bowl in front of me, I'm getting in there. My hand is in the bowl. So again, if I get a chance to try them, I will document it as best as possible. But until then, I am genuinely thinking about it on a regular basis, which is exactly what their marketing team wants from us. And folks, that's really it. Basically everything else is just festive versions of things that already exist at the moment, or festive things being recycled, which I'm not hating on. This is my favourite time of year, even when I'm having a bad day at this time of year. It's never really bad. Or you can like romanticize the bad out of it. And I feel like that's what we're doing with some of these products too, apart from the Bear Cup. That kind of thing needs to be studied by someone far more intelligent than me. But seeing as we are getting into the time of year when traditional food is more prevalent and present than ever, I couldn't wait to talk about this. It also came to mind because one of you guys, in responding to a kind of Ask Me Anything I did quickly on Instagram last month, asked about my kind of favourite weird, quote unquote, Scottish foods and Italian foods and how they are in or out of either context. And it really got me thinking about how many examples of these there are from both countries, and then therefore how many examples there could be from all over the world. I am relatively poorly travelled, only left Europe once and haven't even seen much of Europe itself. So I was delighted to see some of the fabulous responses that you guys gave me. So thank you in advance if you were one of those people. And if not, buckle up, strap in, it should be, buckle up, for what could be a list of things that make you nauseous. It could be a list of things that inspire you. It could be a list of things that shock or confuse or remind you of something you haven't had in a while. You know, I have seen some things here that I want to try. I've seen some things here that I would never like to lay my human eyeballs upon, but it's all very interesting. And there's a lot of animal bits in here, folks. So if you are particularly, not a fan of hearing descriptive things about uncommon foods, this may not be the episode for you, but I want to get into it because some of the stuff is fascinating. But it had to be started in the UK. I will get round to my favourite Scottish specific ones towards the end for any curious people or any fellow Scots. That's where we'll be talking about it. But there were, before that, a couple of stunning examples of UK traditional or old-fashioned foods that to us are delicious and to others are disgusting. So let's get into it. One of the first responses I got, and a great one, has to be bread pudding, or as is more regularly known, bread and butter pudding. We have a lot of things with bread. We've been through various stages of poverty and desperation as a nation as a whole. We have a lot to thank even rationing for during wartime. Things like carrot cake would never have come to us if not for stages like that were grim to live through but did offer something in the end. And bread and butter pudding is a fantastic example of this. It is a grim thought, a grim sight, but it's delicious. It really, really is. Bread pudding is essentially slices of stale bread, when it's just past, probably at the stage where you could still toast it to salvage it, but you're not really happy about it. Your basic couple of days old bread, or like a loaf that hasn't gone mouldy yet that you just never got around to finishing. That buttered or margarined if you have to, then kind of placed diagonally, these slices, usually in a kind of triangular orientation, into a big dish that then has usually raisins added over the top and a kind of sugary custard, and it's then baked for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes until it's crispy on top and gooey and squidgy in the middle. It's bread with custard baked into a pudding, essentially. It's a grim thought, but it really is tasty. It's also very filling. Like, it also works as an actual meal if you really needed it to. Something isn't a million miles away, but is not something I've ever understood. I think this is maybe something more English than Scottish, and therefore I haven't had much kind of experience with it. Bread sauce, which I had someone say was very confusing for their non-British partner when they first tried it. Bread sauce is basically a sauce usually served around the festive period, made with milk, an onion studded with cloves, if I'm not wrong. It's all very Delia Smith. And then just like a shitload of breadcrumbs thrown in there to thicken it up with some salt and pepper. It's just a creamy, relatively bland sauce. Think of like a bechamel, but far less sophisticated or smooth. And it traditionally goes on the plate with the Christmas dinner or with a roast dinner, alongside the gravy, etc. I can think of a million other sauces I'd have first. I think that's my defining opinion of bread sauce. Marmite got mentioned many, many times. It's everyone's favourite yeast extract-based spread, which is almost impossible to describe unless you have sniffed or tasted it. In Australia, of course, they have a similar version called Vegemite, which I find a little bit kind of more gentle on the palate. But if you've never tried it, it's essentially as thick as set honey, though actually no, probably just as sticky also. Dark, dark brown. Like the color, if you're watching this on YouTube, right, like the color of my hair, the color of, I don't know, beef stock, the color of a hot chocolate, and it tastes like meaty salt, though there's no meat in there. It's really salty and really savoury, in the same way that almost like a thickly spreadable soy sauce might taste. It's just pure umami. It's bizarre as a thing. It's really good in soups and in stocks and in even in pasta sauces, though I know that my Italian listeners will find that illegal. It's a really good seasoning, though I don't love it on its own. With butter, it does mellow out. A couple of other honourable mentions from the UK were the the cheese and pineapple hedgehog, or just cheese and pineapple sticks generally. These were an absolute staple of hogmanay parties when I was growing up. Basically cocktail sticks with identically sized cubes of cheddar cheese and tinned pineapple. I think it was usually tinned. Yeah, it was probably tinned pineapple. And the hedgehog came, I can't actually remember what most people use as like the base, but there would be this kind of hemispherical base wrapped in tinfoil, usually very unceremoniously, with all of these cocktail sticks with the cheese and pineapple stuck on top to resemble like a hedgehog's back. The 60s and 70s were clearly a much better time to be living in when it came to imaginative food arrangements, but that's a winner. Peas pudding, and more specifically peas pudding stotties as a Geordie staple, were mentioned more than once also. Peas pudding, I think it's like it's made with yellow split peas or like with lentils cooked until they're soft and like thick, and it can be eaten on its own, like from a tin. You can often get it, or people, as I say, as a Geordie staple, I believe it's used in a bun, in a roll, in a bap, in a stotty to be a sandwich with this lentil base inside with some ham. Again, extremely unappealing from both colour and texture, but not bad. Only one mention from Ireland, and that was Colcannon, which I don't think is particularly unappealing, maybe to people who just don't like vegetables, but it's a kind of iconic combination of potatoes, cabbage and butter, which I think will sometimes have bacon added to it, but then that makes it a different dish, if I'm not wrong. Very unsexy, but very traditional. A couple of French mentions came in with, of course, snails as escargot or with frog's legs, both apparently underrated. I did try snails for the first time this year. I tried them back in April in Paris, and I'm going to put it out there like bread sauce, in the sense that there's nothing wrong with it when you're eating it. They're usually smothered in so much garlic butter that you don't actually detect what you're tasting. Texture's a bit like you're eating mussels. But on the same table, I had duck leg cooked in its own fat, and that truly was far more appealing. We had some crazy mentions from Poland, but my Polish brothers and sisters, you guys do make some very, very delicious things as well as some scary sounding things. So I trust you, especially when it comes to your chocolate lineup. It's very impressive. In terms of sweets, there was, and forgive me for all butchering of pronunciations in every language that pops up here today, makielki, or something similar, makielki, this sweet, cold, poppy seed-based pasta as a dessert. And it's not the first time I've seen something like that, but it's certainly an interesting one, I guess, for the uninitiated. Also, some honourable mentions for soups, often made with tripe. And there's a tendency also towards like sour soups with vegetables or meat inside, with fermented pickles being the kind of sour element, or even fermented rye starter. Definitely not something I have ever come across, but I imagine that kept a lot of people very healthy and warm during some very grim times. Ukrainians came in telling me about their fried liver, which I think is quite a universal thing, probably offal being something that came up very regularly and very traditionally because, of course, we weren't all used to the very neatly packaged, clean pieces of meat that we find in supermarkets in 2025. Jellied meat was also something that came up not only from Ukraine but also from Serbia, meat being far fattier as well as the kind of offal offerings. There was a Serbian mentioned to me that their bacon has like 50% fat. It's not the kind of back bacon nonsense you would find in the UK or even like streaky bacon. They don't mess around, and I respect that deeply. Something that really, really interested me, and I genuinely may look up a recipe for it, came from a Finnish person who was, and again, I know nothing of the language. It's written like Memi or Mami, maybe. And this is a rye pudding, like a pudding made with really dark rye flour and treacle, served with cream. And this is traditionally, apparently, an Easter time dessert there. And it looks bloody lovely. It looks, we're not too far away geographically speaking, so I'd imagine that the kind of winter needs that we had in terms of desserts were fairly similar, speaking of, ancestors. And it looks like a kind of more wholesome sticky toffee pudding. And I kind of haven't been able to get out of my thoughts since I first read this one. So if you see a recipe for a Finnish rye pudding very soon, don't be too confused as to why. We had some mentions come in from not too far away from a couple of Baltic and Russian residents, with milk soup being a common thing that foreigners find really weird, made with pasta, buckwheat or rice. Honestly, I don't hate the idea. Probably not particularly pretty to look at. I love a soup with bits in it. I love a soup even without bits in it, smooth or whatever. But I tell you, in the winter, soup that already has the carbs inside, absolutely love it. So I'm not against that whatsoever. There was another very interesting soup from a little bit further away in Greece called magiritsa. And this is apparently another kind of Easter tradition. It's a creamy soup made with lamb offal. And I honestly, again, not particularly pretty, but I imagine it tastes banging, because whenever you use the kind of uglier animal bits for gravies or stocks, it adds a flavour that nothing else can. So the idea of doing that with lamb, which is already so tasty, again, controversial, not very pretty, but it's probably very, very tasty. We then move a little bit further away into ayran, I believe it's called, which is a Turkish drink. Now, I have seen this before in more than one kebab shop here in Italy. I have seen it available because obviously they usually have some Turkish influence in there. And I thought this was just a kind of yogurt drink, which isn't too strange. Lots of countries have drinking yogurt, kefir, similar things. But this one's actually savoury. It's not like a plain yogurt drink. It's also not like a sweet girly one like Actimel. And it's salty. So I have no idea how that would be. I don't mind yogurt drinks. I don't even mind the like sour, almost fizzy yogurt drinks that you can get also closer to Germany and things like that. So very interesting. And I may have to pick up a bottle, maybe not with the kebab, but when I pass by sometime. Italy, of course, where I am, we have more than a few offerings here. A big one being animelle, which I believe in English would be sweetbreads. Not very pretty, but apparently very, very tasty. Lampredotto was another big mention. It's traditionally eaten mostly in Tuscany, which is tripe, usually prepared with either a kind of red or green dressing stuff. Personally, I like the red one. It's like a tomato-based one that's then cooked and slapped into a sandwich. Again, not pretty. Absolutely not pretty. Is it the best sandwich in the world? No, but it's filling. It's probably very nutritious for everything that's contained inside, and it's what people have been eating there for a very long time. A couple of mentions from further north in Italy include pizzoccheri, which I'd heard of but had never seen before. It's a fairly grim brown and greenish looking pasta dish made with bits that people would normally eat. You also have cotechino, very traditional around, if I'm not wrong, it's something that's usually eaten around New Year or just in winter in general, especially in the north. There's something similar also called zampone. And it's very ugly, folks. It's basically a giant, super high fat content sausage that even when it's cooked for hours remains soft and pink. So your brain kind of doesn't really register that it's cooked, if that makes sense. It's completely safe to eat, but it looks like you're eating raw sausage, but it's like warm raw sausage is what it feels like. And it's usually served with lentils, things like that. I personally quite like it. The texture isn't for everyone, and the appearance certainly isn't for everyone, but I find it very cozy. It reminds me of, the kind of fatty, meaty things that we would have back home in the winter as well. And of course, a big and completely unmissable mention further away in the lovely island of Sardinia is of course casumarzu, or cacciomarcio. I guess it would be literally translated in Italian, rotten cheese. This is a very, very strong cheese that has a certain kind of bacteria in it that attracts a certain kind of insects that let their little worms, their little kids, their little larvae grow and crawl all the way through it. So it's a cheese full of maggots, and you eat it traditionally, though not anymore. I believe it's actually not considered legally okay anymore because it's risky if not made right, and there is a version without the maggots. But the traditional kind you do eat with the maggots still alive in there. You cut it off in pieces and eat it like that. Apparently delicious, apparently very, very strong, very, very savoury, but it does have that little something that no other cheese does. Maggots, and flavour-wise also. Something I've seen in Italy, but also had a couple of comments from someone in Bosnia and in Croatia telling me that eggs and sugar whipped together, mostly just the egg yolks from some, and sugar mixed together, like whipped together and then eaten with a spoon as a sweet treat. I can imagine British mums losing their mind over this because the idea of a raw egg to us is like the end of the world. But very, very common as like a quick kind of pick-me-up. Had some very interesting answers from the US, some examples that you may have already heard of before, such as sweet potato casserole, which is the kind of thing you'll see served at Thanksgiving or at Christmas in certain states. Basically like cooked mashed sweet potato with butter, and then they'll put marshmallows on top, and that's served as a completely sensible vegetable side dish. I don't know, who am I to complain? And some other mentions from specifically from Oklahoma, which I found very interesting, from the kind of less wealthy parts of the state where you had to make do with what was armadillo, which is apparently delicious, opossum, apparently a bit too fatty to be enjoyable, but that raccoons and rabbits, when cooked well, are both very tasty. I think rabbit is something that most of the world will engage in. It's something you can find everywhere. Raccoons, armadillos, and opossums, probably not, but very interesting nonetheless. We had an interesting entry from Mexico with sopa de panza, which is a soup made with stomach, corn, chili, tomatoes, etc. Honestly, I've yet to see any kind of Mexican dish that isn't tempting in some way. Very, very talented people when it comes to using all sorts of ingredients, even the very bare bones of them. So still looks good to me, even if it's called stomach soup. Something that is tempting me, not quite as much as the Finnish rye pudding, but something that is truly of the kind I have never heard of, is Colombian hot chocolate. Because apparently in Colombia, you put cheese in your hot chocolate. Now, I don't mean like Philadelphia. I don't mean like mascarpone, the kind of thing that could be used to be creamy and just fatty and enjoyable. No, like lumps of just like white cheese. Like mozzarella will be put to add creaminess, body, and even a tiny bit of saltiness to hot chocolate. And it sounds insane, but it also doesn't sound entirely unsensible at the same time. I don't know if I could try it here without being arrested, but I would love to know more about this as soon as possible. We move on to some amazing mentions. So thank you so much to the person who commented this on YouTube from a specifically Chinese Canadian perspective. So Chinese immigrants in Canada, being Montreal peanut butter dumplings, Thunder Bay bonbons, and Newfoundland chow mein, fried macaroni, and ginger beef. These are all, kind of Chinese-inspired dishes using the ingredients that were available in Canada, using peanut butter as a kind of dressing, which wouldn't normally be done in something that would have been otherwise traditional. And I love that kind of crossover of ingredients. And that whole comment was so detailed and very, very delicious sounding, the way everything was, even though obviously in the context, it's all stuff that would probably sound wacky to Canadians, to Chinese people, or to anyone. Speaking of China, we had some mentions for chicken feet, fermented tofu, and the infamous century eggs, which didn't surprise me whatsoever. I think it would take a lot of tempting to get me into one of those eggs. The fermented tofu and the chicken feet, I think I could get behind if they were done right. Australians came in with their Vegemite, unsurprisingly, and fairy bread, which I don't know if that can be counted as traditional. It's probably as traditional as the American sweet potato casserole, speaking in terms of actual time and distance from the present. But fairy bread is, if I'm not wrong, sliced white bread with butter and then sugar sprinkles, like hundreds and thousands on top, and eaten very often at kids' parties, apparently. I don't know. You do you, folks. And I then wanted to offer my own examples here as a Scot. We get a lot of tourism, usually not for our food, quite rightly so, I might add. We are certainly not the culinary hub of Europe, let alone the world, but we do have some very good, very underrated, but very ugly, old-fashioned traditional things that I'm going to throw in here. Number one being haggis. It's our national dish. We even have a haggis in in one of the museums in Edinburgh, being presented as an animal. I'll leave that there, folks, so you can believe whatever you like. It's like Nessie. She's real to most of us. Haggis is, in reality, a sheep's stomach chopped up into a million tiny bits, minced, obliterated, basically. And then there is fat, oats, spices like black pepper and various other things added. It's then put back into another casing. It's then kind of typically boiled for 2 to 3 hours, something ridiculous like that. Outside of its casing, it can also be fried, like broken up and fried that way, or sliced and fried in slices, often very traditionally used as part of a full Scottish breakfast, or put into breakfast sandwiches and all of that good stuff, though mostly eaten on either St Andrew's Day or Burns Night with neeps and tatties, meaning mashed swede and mashed potatoes, and usually with a kind of gravy or some kind of sauce over the top. I'm a big fan, but it's very, very ugly. And the idea does put most people off, but it's very tasty. Even more off-putting for many people is black pudding, though I know that there are variations of this that exist all over the world. This is essentially a meat pudding, or a kind of very dense sausage thing made with blood, fat, oats, all the good stuff. That is very, 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 very dark brown or fully black. That again is mostly served sliced and fried, and it's delicious. I don't think there exists a meatier thing than black pudding, and I love it. Tablet is a kind of similarly disturbing sweet variant. Basically, imagine like a fudge that's been cooked until the sugar has crystallized. The ingredients are essentially butter, sugar, and syrup cooked for like 15-20 minutes. It goes on forever, and you need someone with very, very good upper body strength for the final stirring stage. And then it's cut into tiny little cubes and often served as a little kind of sweet treat. You'll often find it nowadays as a kind of thing that you'll get with your cup of tea or coffee at the end of a meal, and it's nice. It's a little sweet. Of course, it's incredibly violently sweet, but it's tasty. We also have Cullen skink, which is a very kind of creamy smoked fish soup. Not very pretty, and again, if you're not into fish, it can be particularly unappealing. But the mix of usually like leeks, potatoes, milk, cream, and smoked haddock, it's just delicious. That, when it's cold outside, is just warmth for the soul at the same time. Stovies is another mention that I don't even know if I'll be able to find a picture of this to put up on screen, but it's like the leftovers from a Sunday dinner, the leftovers from roasted meat, usually mashed up with mashed potatoes and the gravy itself into one big kind of very filling mass. if that word could be used. It's often traditionally served at the end of weddings to kind of soak up the alcohol and if you've been dancing to give you back your energy. But it's the kind of thing that was typically eaten the day after you would have had mince and tatties, or the day after you would have had your Sunday dinner, to not have anything go to waste, really. Clearly by people who were cooking too many tatties in the first place. There could also be things such as clouty dumplings and Scotch pies mentioned, but truly I can't defend them either. So that's it, folks. I hope you have taken some inspiration from this and not just nausea. Some things in here, especially that Finnish dessert and the cheese in the hot chocolate from Colombia, have drawn me in like nothing else. So I'm very, very happy to have received all of the responses that I did. Thank you again so much. If you did respond on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever, this has been very, very educational, very, very interesting. And I hope you guys have enjoyed it as much as I have. And I will see you for next month's episode. Thank you as always for being here. See you soon.